the Inland Talk Express.
Joining us today in our discussion is Ghulam Sarwar, who is a family man married to Naseem Akhtar. Mr. Sarwar is a civil engineer from Pakistan. He attended RCC in Riverside and came to the country in 1993, about a quarter of a century ago. Mr. Sarwar started as a junior clerk at Circle K, then became the manager. In 1996, he worked for AMPM as a general manager, and in 1999, he bought his first gas station, Fast Strip, in Ukaipa, and sold it in 2014. In 2003, Mr. Sarwar built an Arco gas station. In 2006, he built a Church's Chicken and a 76 gas station in Banning. It's also worth mentioning that Mr. Sarwar is a longtime friend and actually has been very supportive of me, both in my practice as well as in my nonprofit organization. So I thought it was fitting for him to join us today in this important discussion. And also joining us today is Garth Newberry. Mr. Newberry is a retired educator. He worked for full-time 25 years at Rialto High School. He attended college majoring in transportation design, and he is also a pilot of AOPA Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, and he's also an activist and very involved in the National Education Association. I met Mr. Newberry very early on in my career. He actually has been also very supportive in my practice as well. I don't know if you remember, it's been a while, Mr. Newberry, that we've met each other. So I wanted to appreciate you guys joining us today. So some of the things that I wanted to talk about today, and actually because we got so many responses and a lot of people had responded to our discussions last week when we talked about the protest for justice, specifically as it pertained to the NFL, as well as the Colin Kaepernick issue, which is actually, when we talked last week, I really was not aware of the fact that things were going to blow up the way that they did. We talked on Sunday, which was the 2nd, and by the 4th, he was the national spokesperson for Nike, and so we've heard a lot of people who are going out and protesting against Nike and cutting their Nike emblems off their shorts, their pants, and everything else, and burning Nike gear. So we're going to expand a little bit on that and talk a little bit about the Colin Kaepernick issue. Also, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because when it came to the issue of protest, there's actually questions that friends of mine have come to me, and we've discussed the issue of protest. Protest is a very important issue because, as Dr. Akil Bashir and the rest of the crew always talk about, what are we doing? And protest is one of the mechanisms that you obviously use in order to see if you can call attention to justice, right? Mm-hmm. And so one of the things we're going to start first by asking a couple of questions as we talk about Colin Kaepernick. I really wanted to talk a little bit, and I don't want to get hung up on Kaepernick too much, but I will talk a little bit about what we've been receiving as far as emails and things that we've got on our Facebook pages and Twitter and Instagram and whatever else we have, is that it seems like we continue to do this. We're hearing the same thing, which, in other words, I don't believe that people are mad about Colin Kaepernick and the fact that he's kneeling and that people are supporting that. I think that it's more or less of what the same old thing, right? How dare a black man do what he wants to do? You know what I'm saying? How dare you be able to have your own voice? You know what I'm saying? We're paying you to play football, so how dare you get down on your knees and protest and the fact that he is, dishonoring the flag, dishonoring veterans, and it's all creating this narrative, and nobody is talking about the real issue. And the real issue is that he's kneeling because he is protesting against police brutality. It has nothing to do with the flag. It has nothing to do with the veterans. And in fact, as we know, it was a veteran who told him to kneel in the first place, right? And so, that whole argument seems to make a lot of sense. And also the critics that we've gotten on the in the emails and on social media even brought up the issue of black on black crime. Yeah. They said the real issue is black on black crime. That's a more important issue. So not only are they telling you that you can't kneel, they're also telling you what your arguments have to be, right? It has to be one thing or another, almost like we're only monolithic. We can only talk about one problem or the other. We can't talk about more than one thing at a time. And so, you know, and what we always find ourselves doing is backing ourselves into a corner where we're always defending our position, right? We're always trying to justify, why it isn't, why we're not talking about why it has nothing to do with the flag, or why it doesn't have anything to do with the veterans and our military servicemen. Instead of the focus is, why aren't we doing something about police brutality? Exactly. That's really the focus of the entire situation, and nobody really wants to talk about that. And so when you're talking about police brutality, instead of getting a response about that from these individuals, what you're getting is a response related primarily to why is he doing this? He's not an American. He's unpatriotic. If these people didn't do what they were doing, they wouldn't get beat by the police. I mean, just all kinds of crazy stuff, But again, what I'm seeing is that it is actually working. Nike is actually doing something. I don't know what the motive is, but I think that what we're actually seeing is the fact that I don't think that Nike's concerned about the fact that they're trying to boycott them. Right. I can guarantee you none of those, if they buy a Nike, it's by accident. It's because it's on sale or something. None of those individuals are going out buying Nike gear, and Nike's not going to be hurt. I think that their sales actually increased over 30% over the weekend just by creating this campaign, right? So, I believe that we need to put it really in perspective. And from my perspective is that I believe that you're seeing individuals who are grasping at their last straw. It's almost like, you remember when Ali was beating Foreman, right before Foreman fell down? That's what it looks like. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you done got whooped up on. We're in Zaire. You're just hanging on to the ropes because you're getting ready to fall, and this is just someone who is basically just kind of holding on for their last straw. I mean, you seem to be concerned because when you're talking about making things great again, you're seeing that the culture is changing. That young people aren't falling for the same things that your generation fell for, and the world is changing. I was talking to someone the other day about social media and how basically they cannot carry the narrative the way that they used to, right? The way people get their news is what? Whenever you call me, Bilal, what do you say? Did you see what happened on Facebook?
Yeah, on Facebook. Yeah.
Nobody's calling and asking me what happened. Did you read the Press Enterprise? Nobody's asking me, did you read the LA Times or one of the major newspapers? They can't control the narrative because now basically it's a different game, right? So the press isn't controlling the narrative, so you're getting your information differently. Younger people don't even watch TV the way that they used to. Now they get their TV on the internet. Exactly. You want to see something, you get it off of Netflix, or YouTube or whatever else. So they're not really controlling this narrative, and I think that you see some people just grabbing on to, their lifeline. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's sad, because I think that ultimately what you're doing is it shows the ignorance of people. People are being exposed, right? We talked about last week that obviously these individuals are on the wrong side of history, because obviously we know we said that on Sunday, and then he's the face of Nike, because we understand that's really what happens when it comes to the issue of protest, right? People understood that what happened with Ali. People understood that what happened with all of our icons that were involved in some sort of civil rights struggle. And so, I don't know how much. It's kind of almost like beating a dead horse. when we talk about the issue, I think that we should more focus on the fact that, you know, he's trying to deal with police brutality, and this is a way of doing it, and this is not actually the end. This is a means to an end. It's one of the ways that we deal with it. It's not the only way, because we know, as we know, protest is just part of the whole tools that you use when you're trying to expose things and bring attention to it. But I think that what we're finding is that everything that we have, all the responses we have, none of the responses had anything mentioned of police brutality. You know, we've been called terrorists, we've been called, you know, unpatriotic, we've been called, you know, all kinds of stuff. You know what I mean? And I told the one guy, when I said, look, you know, I think somebody responded and said, you know, Mr. Ali is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, right? So he couldn't respond to that. You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, where's the patriotism, right? But at any rate, Doc, I mean, and we're going to hit some of the other stuff, but, I mean, you wasn't here with us, unfortunately, last week, and I know that basically, you know, your ears on the street like usual. So what's your perspective on that?
Well, you know, briefly, when we understand what a protest is, the actual definition is a statement of action expressing disapproval or rejection of something. Now, you know, every individual, and this is where we have to go to the human rights as opposed to the constitutional rights. Every individual from the human perspective under human rights has the opportunity and has the wherewithal to protest anything that they see as an unjust or unconstructive component of anything that it is. You know, the amazing thing being that I was born in the 50s, coming through the 60s, coming through the 70s, and have seen major movements, they've tried to define every movement from their narrative. First of all, they wanted peaceful movements. They wanted nonviolent movements. They wanted nonverbal movements. So through the whole process of protest, the ones that are creating the oppressive actions are trying to define the reality of what the protesters do and think. That's ludicrous. So in actuality, I think why you see such a level of support for our brother is because people inherently will cling to somebody that stands against all odds and stands for the right rationale. And I think that's what you see that is going on, the level of support. And Nike should be saluted, whatever their ulterior motives, if they do have ulterior motives, the fact that they are standing up and supporting against all odds someone who has stood up and went against the really the corporate culture and the culture of dysfunction in this country, they need to be applauded. Right.
I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, as far as what Nike is doing, I know everybody's going out and getting their Nike gear and buying. And again, I mean, we can always debate about what their motives are, but I think that, you know, what is important and you know, it's really inspirational when you look at the way that they did the video. Because, I mean, you're talking about someone, the whole focus is when you're going out and you're putting everything out on the line. And ultimately, in the final analysis, they wanted to see him be destroyed.
Yes, they did.
By taking a stand. And actually, he's not being destroyed. Actually, they're making him an icon.
Exactly.
You know, and by making him an icon, it's even making them more. You know, like, you know, they're going to boycott the NFL. Most of the people who are trying to boycott the NFL haven't even been to an NFL game. Most of these people probably can't even afford to go to an NFL game.
Yes.
The NFL shouldn't be concerned about it, and I know Nike's not concerned about it because these aren't the individuals that they're targeting anyway. And who wants those types of patrons anyway?
Exactly.
Who wants that kind of support that you're going to, you know, one of the things that, and I get it. I mean, I understand that there are individuals who have their own opinion about whether someone should stand for the flag or not, right? You know, that could be your stance one way or the other, right? I mean, but what's crazy is how could someone be so short-sighted? How can an adult be so short-sighted when it's clear as to why he's doing what he's doing? And maybe sometimes, man, we have things in us that are so deep that we can't really understand it, right? I mean, I have friends of mine who are seriously against Colin Kaepernick and what he's doing, and I'm shocked that they're against it, right? It's surprising, you know what I mean? And so you have to ask yourself this question: what is it? You know what I mean? And so I can't comprehend that type of mentality. You know what I mean? And so, you know, I don't really want to use the word diabolical, because maybe that isn't the right word to use, but I think that it's a level of ignorance. You know what I'm saying? A level of ignorance where you're rushing to judgment on an issue without really caring about the fact that there's police brutality that's going on in this country. And if your child was beat up by the police, right, you would have a different ideology as to how you would respond to that, right? And there are individuals that are so short-sighted that they believe that these things don't happen, that basically if you get beat up by the police, you had to have done something in order for that to happen.
But see, that's their perception, Brother Ali, and I know you want to get to your guest, but your perception is your reality. So if I can't understand the normal in which you're operating from, if I have not had the experience, there's no way in the world that psychologically I'm going to be able to adjust to what you're going through, because my reality doesn't even allow me to interpret what you're going through. So this is why we get people that do not see any ill in the prison industrial complex, in the police law enforcement system, or anything else, because they have never had any type of negative engagement with that system. So anytime they hear about somebody abstractly going against that system, they feel that that individual is wrong because they cannot perceive the reality or the normality that that person is operating in. That's what our problem is.
I mean, I also think that it's a level of subconsciously that I think that they're seeing, you know, when you feel like maybe you have an advantage, maybe you feel like the system is a system that allows you to function in a way that gives you some sort of privilege. Right? And so the way that privilege is primarily provided or functions in our society is primarily through the criminal justice system. It is really the equalizer. It's the one thing that no matter what the situation is, that the criminal justice system tends to actually work a certain way. The individuals that they target to prosecute, the individuals that they target in law enforcement, is generally people of color and people who are, you know, on a lower level of the social economic scale. And that's, so in other words, although it's pseudo privilege, I don't think it's privilege. In fact, I think it's something that they have in their minds, right? Because I mean, you have to understand when you talk about culture, and it's a very interesting concept of culture and culture in this country. When you think about the people who came to this country, right? Now, you know, I've been to Europe, I've been to the UK, I've been to different places, and you have to think who was coming to America to look for a better life. They were not royalty. The people who came to this country were the peasants, right? So when you look at, you're trying to construct privilege, because obviously you did not come from privilege in the old world. You came to a remote place where there was really nothing. That's what your ancestors did. And you're not, and so you created a culture here that gave you a privilege that your DNA did not have early on, right? And on the flip side, for those that have come to this country, whether you're indigenous to North America, or whether you're someone who was brought to North America, the chances are your DNA may have some royalty in it, right? So now the irony is that we live in a society where basically royalty was put in bondage by non-royalty, right? I mean, let's just be real, right? I'm not trying to, but that's really the reality of it. And everybody that came to this country, obviously, other than those of us who came unwillingly, came to seek a better life because they were not treated fairly. Right? So you would expect that people who come from backgrounds where they were probably not treated fairly, if you're looking for a better life from Europe, right? You probably was, how bad could it have been in Europe? If you see what I'm saying? So if you're coming here, obviously you were oppressed. And now you're coming from a background of people who were oppressed, coming to America, and now you've got other individuals who are coming to America, and then you condemning them. So I don't understand how that mindset exists where you've come to a country where you're seeking a better life, because you could not have been royalty, and you were obviously not from the blue blood. So you come to the country, and now that you get in this country because you're seeking a better life, and then when other individuals come to the country, then you're mistreating those individuals, right? What type of, so who is really suffering from the psychosis? I mean, obviously we can say, well, we got some degree of PTSD, post-traumatic slave syndrome for us, but also the indigenous people, and we see what happened to the Native Americans and what's going on with them. But then what is the psychosis of them coming to the country and doing that? It's like, what makes someone mentally come to a country and not have any type of compassion for other people? You know what I'm saying? Because I can't understand that. When you talk about reality, Doc, I don't understand that kind of reality. I don't understand if Tom Brady, and I said this before, if Tom Brady was to kneel and say, I'm protesting because I don't like the way police officers are being treated, you're not going to get a peep out of me. Am I going to call him unpatriotic? Because I can't relate to that kind of mind of thinking. So I'm trying to understand where you coming from, right? I'm trying to understand what makes an individual think that way. Bilal, I don't know, right?
Yeah. It's mind-boggling when you see it, because you have all these different cultures and stuff that migrates over here, and then take advantages of a lot of the bills or amendments and stuff that we died and shed blood for, and those rights and stuff that we died for, that we shed blood for, has been adopted by those individuals that come from another country. But to sit back and see, to see the oppression happen. I mean, there should be a mass scale of protest, not just from African Americans when you're dealing with an issue such as this. There should be a mass protest from all minorities that's been through the same type of trauma or the same type of oppression that we've been through. You should see multiple different faces out there that's doing these protests, and it just shouldn't be African American. So I understand what you're saying. It's crazy, because I want to just kind of go back to what you said. You was hesitant about using the phrase diabolical, but on the face it is. It's diabolical as hell. When someone can sit back and see someone get gunned down and get killed, and then try to argue the fact that someone is peacefully protesting, so the rest of the world who is looking, because they have the platform for the whole world to see, and make them recognize that this is going on, to wake up. But those individuals that sit back and said, this is unpatriotic or whatever it is, those are the people that are diabolical. They continue to allow this stuff to happen. When you can sit back and you can bring this big old fuss, and I hate to say it, about 1,000 children being molested by priests, and you don't hear no protest whatsoever, but you hear a protest about a man taking a knee, that's diabolical as hell.
Right. Yeah, I mean it is. I mean they pick and choose. I mean it's deeper than just an individual who has who's taking a knee. I mean clearly you can't be that mad because he took a knee. Yeah. You can't make me believe that. You know what I'm saying? I remember when Mahmoud Abdul Rauf did not stand for the national anthem. And he didn't even give a reason why he didn't stand. You know what I'm saying? But you didn't hear no one say a peep, right? And so it clearly had to be more to it than that, right? Yeah. And so, you know, I don't know, Rose. I mean, you tell me what you think is going on.
Well, I don't know. I feel like, you know, as a millennial myself, I feel like if we look at history, you know, civil rights activists, much like activists nowadays, they really never successfully connected with the older generation, you know, because there's always this gap, and you can see it in history. The process was never really neat, you know, and it was not even neat that it destroyed the Democratic Party of Roosevelt and Truman. But I feel like the point is not to convince the people who boo even when a team member, you know, knees before the anthem or anything like that. I feel like the point is to reach out to the children, to the younger generation. The point is to reach out to the future. And he has very well done so. You know, there's been a poll, Kaiser poll actually, that was conducted on January 24 to February 28 with a very large pool of participants. And among the youngest group, from 18 to 29, 57%, more than half, majority say that the anthem protests are appropriate. You know, so what are the future? What are those in our future saying? What is the younger population saying? You know, it's not really, I feel, about, yes, we're going to have a lot of individuals coming out and making comments about it. You know, the older generation, because there's always that gap. But what is the younger generation saying? You know, what are the younger generation that is going to continue in the whole protesting? Right. What are they saying? They're saying that they accept that.
Yeah, I know we were talking about other people protesting and. Gulam, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of that in a few minutes. But one of the things that, you know, that's clear and obvious is that those types of what he's doing is necessary. Nobody's going to do anything that's not going to create controversy and expect to progress. That's part of the pain. That's part of the pain. Pain comes with progress. Right, and obviously nothing is going to happen until something like that happens. Until you know we go to those types of protests. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and some of the questions that I get often, is about our protest and are we collaborating with other individuals, or are we being exploited? Do we have a call? Or are we being exploited? And when I say that question is that I'm just going to throw some questions out there. I'm not going to say, yeah, go ahead. Let's take a caller real quick. Hello, caller?
Yeah, I'm just calling in because the real reason Nike signed Kaepernick, it was a brilliant advertising move. They made almost $50 million in 12 hours. Okay, they might sympathize with his cause, but it was a money move. And I'm not saying the rest of them, they didn't want to make the money move, but Nike did. And when you say you don't really know what's going on, it's white supremacy at work. They do not want to lose their edge. I mean, everybody came here instead of the Indians. Everybody who came here is a foreigner, really. But they don't want to lose their edge. It's no secret. Look at the man in the White House. He's made it popular for you to discriminate. He don't even care. And they coming out of the woodwork. Now, Nike people burning up their tennis shoes, it don't even matter. They said I think they make $7.3 billion a year. They said if it keeps going like this, they'll make, they could make $50 billion, So they don't mind signing Kaepernick. It's a legitimate cause. They don't really mind, and I'm not mad at him because the brother needs some money. Even though he put it on the line, all the great ones put it on the line. He didn't care about his money. He didn't care about his career. He seen something that was happening to black people, and the man stood up. But he didn't really get the real support from the black community. They really should have been boycotting everything. Nike is backing us right now because you know who made Nike? Black people. You got kids who can't even afford them Nikes, them Jordans and whatever. And they got them on their feet.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we always tend to, and you make a good point where it seemed like that his support came when when the more people were kind of waiting to see, is it going to be accepted? Is it cool for me to support him? And once it became kind of popular to support him, then that's when everybody came to his rescue. But during the time period in which it was really going down, I think people were kind of hesitant, and they're waiting to see what everybody else said. And then once you start, and then a lot of times, when you do see the support for him, it comes from someone other than our community. And once someone outside our community began to start supporting him, then everybody's like, okay, it's cool to support him now. You know what I mean? So, I understand exactly what you're talking about, and it's not the first time that we've done things like that. It's when we wait to see when it's okay to support our folks when they're doing things like that, and once they get support from other people, then that's when we come out.
Like when Jasper Williams, I didn't like a lot of things what Jasper Williams said at Aretha Franklin's funeral. And believe me, I mean, we will slaughter our own brother, and we'll slaughter our own brother just for a slight, but we'll get this white man a pass. And I know this sounds racist. It sounds racist, but it's the truth. We will get this white man a pass, and we'll slaughter our brother in the street for nothing, basically nothing. But anyway, I think you guys are on point. Like when Ali came out, when Dr. King came out against Vietnam, he wouldn't support it. He couldn't even get money from nowhere. He couldn't even find a dollar.
Right.
People like Aretha Franklin was supporting him, sending them checks, blank checks. So the civil. We need to get more into that marching and shutting them down, and because if you just talk no action, they don't care. They say, they ain't doing nothing but talking.
Right.
Just like we'll pass safe one, and the rest of them will fall in line. But anyway, I appreciate you taking my call.
All right, and
guys, enjoy your day.
Okay, thank you for calling. So one of the things that I wanted to go into next is to talk about questions that I'm getting, and oftentimes when it comes to then that actually kind of is a little bit related to what we're talking about, and when we talk about our protest and protesting as we're collaborating with other individuals. Now, for example, we talked about this last week, and we talked about the civil rights movement, Doc, and we talked about how, it really was a catalyst to the Civil Rights Acts, which many individuals benefited from. And oftentimes it seemed like the people who benefited the most from some of the struggle are so oftentimes individuals who gave the least. You know what I mean? In other words, the Civil Rights Acts, when you're talking about, I mean, let's just be honest about it. We're talking about it provided a source of protection for the rights of women and other minorities. But did we really make it possible for other people to sit at the table, right, and get invited to dinner, and we still in the kitchen, right? And so that's kind of the thing that I hear a lot about. Hey, these individuals come in here, and then we're trying to protest it. I had a friend who, during the travel ban, who actually went to the airport and actually tried to be supportive of other individuals, during that time. Because we always willing to put it on the line for people other than ourselves. Am I lying, Doc?
Well, that's a show within itself. Ooh, that's a show.
And so, the question is, sometimes do you feel exploited? I mean, for example, Gulam, I know, for example, like with me and you, and I wanted you to come to the show because me and you cool. And I know that you support me all the time, and that's for sure. But what happens a lot of times is that you're seeing, like, for example, the way that African Americans, indigenous African Americans, and other people will support, and we talked a little bit about this. They will come out and they would support whether it's Muslims who are coming from other countries in this country. You know, we ain't having that. We don't like people to be mistreated, and we're going to speak up and we're going to march for those individuals and do what we need to do to help those individuals if they're being mistreated. But when you look at the police brutality and you see African Americans getting beat, African Americans not being treated right, do we see other people come and march for our causes? Or are we just marching for somebody else, right?
So, you know, people come out even at the mosque level. You know, we celebrate your, you know, that month, and we always do that. And secondly, about this player, which one we were talking about earlier, some people have a plan. Then God has a plan. The people had a plan. This guy lose money, and he failed. But it did not happen. God has a plan. The God's plan always, you know, succeeds.
Right.
And this guy made more money.
Yeah.
And that guys, you know, God's plan always be a successful and superior than others.
That's true.
Yes.
I mean, he's a prime example of that. You know, basically, you know, he plans, and we plan, and God plans, and God is the best of all planners, right?
Yeah,
so ultimately
absolutely.
it came out. But what do you think about that, Bilal? And I go to you, Doc, on that issue of.
I mean, I mean, when you look at it, it backfired, you know, so to speak. It backfired, you know, and like you said, you know, God's plan is the best plan, and that's going to be the plan that ultimately prevails. It's just that when I understand what you're saying in terms of culture as well, in terms of people coming out and protesting and standing beside you. Of course, sporadically we see different cultures and different races that do come out, but it goes back to, like you say, you know, there were different laws and things that we helped put into place in this country in order to make it a better living for, you know, the generations that's coming behind us. But then there's also individuals that came along and they capitalized on, you know, those benefits. But then when it comes down to, you know, the injustice that is imposed upon African Americans, you know, you don't, like I say, it goes back to what I just said earlier. You just don't see it, you know, and that's just how it is. You don't see it. And of course we can go back to the caller and say, what the caller was saying in terms of African Americans don't come out until like Nike came out. You don't see people jump on that bandwagon. But that, you know, that goes back to, you know, we've been tremendously brainwashed and damaged over the course of the years, you know. But I think now, that we're at a point in time now where we're actually waking up, and the younger generation is waking up, and they're actually seeing white supremacy for what it is now.
Well, I'll be a little more poignant. You're 100% correct. No, we do not get the support of other groups that we have given. Yeah, we can generalize and say you have had some that have came out and support us, but if you look at the nature of our people, we are a very congenial people. We have a nurturing about us. We have not reciprocated, we have not seen the reciprocation, especially off of the 60s movement, which created the social dynamic in this country. So many people are standing on what we have sacrificed and what we have put out there, and they don't even understand the fact that there needs to be some valuing of what we did. There needs to be a real reflection on people of any type of oppression. Once we see that oppression and once we stand for justice, you can't dictate what type of justice, or only standing for justice as it relates to your ethnicity. When you stand for justice, you stand for justice across the board. My brother talked about God, and I totally agree with him. God plans, but in the process of God planning, God expects you to go to work. He doesn't expect you to sit back and just wait for him to orchestrate everything as is. You've got to put some sacrifice, you've got to put some work in, let him know or her know that you value the fact that you are being God-led. So we really got some reflection to do, and us as a people, we really have to value ourselves more than we value others. We have a real problem undercutting what we stand for in our own greatness while we're laying the foundation for everybody to stand on our sacrifices. No more. Those days are over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, it seems like, you know, what's crazy is that you know, I think that when we look at the whole issue of Dr. King and, you know, the fact that during the time of civil rights that and also with El Hajj Malik Shabazz, and during this time where they came to the realization that really we're talking about a human rights issue. And it is a human rights issue, and color and race is really social construct. I mean, there's no question about it. The problem is trying to convince everybody else, and we're not the only ones that are suffering psychologically about trying to understand who we really are. There are other individuals that are suffering and not truly understanding who they really are. And then, you know, ideally, there should be a collaboration among individuals to make sure that we're trying to advance the whole idea of, you know, of human rights, because the game is strong, and the game is that, you know, there's a concerted effort to divide people, and the effort to divide people is not just necessarily people of color, but also white people and black people. The people who support, for example, this particular president, especially the white people, they're not going to gain anything from his presidency. There's no, me and the president have more in common than he has with than most white people, right? But they don't understand the game. The game is that basically, you know, it's the blame game. And the blame game means that as long as I can have people divided amongst each other, then I can actually control those individuals. It's divide and conquer. And so you have all these people who are going against their interests because they don't really have anything else to hold on to. It's all about hope, right? And the hope is that basically, you know, I'm in this position, and I'm in this position because, you know, I'm losing my culture, I'm losing my whatever it may be, you know, these are the things that I'm losing. And the reality of it is that the president, no matter what the president, Donald Trump does, it's not going to benefit the majority of the white people in this country. That's a folk tale, right? But it's one of the things that they've been able to advance. The everyday working class person who goes to work every day has more in common with the average person in the country, right? And do you agree with that?
Yes.
Gar?
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
I just want to make a few remarks on this here.
Sure.
I think African Americans have been throughout history, have been some of the most patriotic people in the country. And as I think about the generation before me, the soldiers came back from World War II. Okay, they were in Europe and Japan and the South Pacific. When they came back here, they were treated worse than some of the prisoners the Nazi prisoners that we had here who came to this country. They were treated, they couldn't ride on the bus, they couldn't drink at the water fountain, they didn't have the opportunities that the immigrants who came here from overseas, who were our enemy at that time. And that's just a generation before me. I was born in the 50s. Also, I remember, and you talk about being patriotic, when I was growing up, I think they had integration was a big thing in the public schools. And I remember the Little Rock 7, kids going to school, the other side actually spit on the children going to school. Where's the protest for that? Okay, so you're saying, of course, I agree with Curtis Mayfield's song, "This is my country." We fought 300 years or more of slave driving sweat and whelps on our back. So this is my country. But what I'm saying is, I understand the protests, and what else can you do? Even back in the 50s and 60s, African Americans coming back from the Korean War and even Vietnam War, they tried to buy real estate in certain areas. They burned crosses. I'm saying certain groups. They were disenfranchised. Threw rocks at their houses. So where's the protest on that? And you say, be patriotic. Mm-hmm. This is my country. So I just say, on the bottom line of this conversation, God does have a plan, and I think good will prevail. Mm-hmm. And I think that mosques, churches, synagogues, educators, they should all get together and come together to do this.
Right.
To better this. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so, look, I want, and I'm, I just want to kind of come in where he left out about the mosque and the churches. Almost in every corner, just like liquor store, we have churches. Mm-hmm. We have temples, we have mosques, we have synagogues. And whenever you look back to the religious belief, to whatever it is, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, there was always, when you look back to the days of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to Isa alayhi salam, you looked at individuals that came up, that pushed the word of God, and they were oppressed. They were oppressed. They were stoned. They were oppressed. And whenever I don't care if you look at this movie that depicts that, or whether you read the story, it hits you in your heart. If you're a true believer in that religious belief, it hits you in your heart. The same type of hurt and the pain that you have in your belief system for one of your prophets being abused or being oppressed is the same type of pain and hurt that you should have in your heart when you see individuals being gunned down in the street, when you see people being oppressed in the street. That's the same type of hurt. That's the same type of fear, because the prophet stood up for people like that. The prophet stood up for people like Bilal that had a rock put up on his chest. These were the same type of people that stood up and fought. I mean, when you go back and you look at what's going on right now, this is the type of hurt and the pain that you just feel every time you see somebody is getting gunned down because you are God's person. Period.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, because if you don't have that, man, it says a lot about your belief system, period.
I mean, I think that, and it's true. I mean, I think that we're definitely in a situation where, I mean, if they don't understand that by now, I don't know, I don't think that we have people that can even relate to that, even on that level. I think that that's just a level of consciousness that people aren't willing or unable to actually relate to for whatever reason. Because I mean, I think what you said is really at the basic level, and it should be the driving force, especially when we're saying that we consider ourselves to be a Christian country. However, sometimes that same religious institution is really the catalyst as to why they don't believe it should be supported. So the thing about it, some of the people who are the most critical people, I mean, just like we hear some of the responses that we had to the show that we did, actually they use God as the reason why we shouldn't be supported. They're saying that we're godless people, that Kaepernick is a godless person, that basically these people who are out in the streets doing this and not standing for the flag are godless people. So basically, that level of trying to differentiate between religion and differentiate between belief, is really, really difficult, because people are preaching these things from the pulpit. You know what I mean? They're teaching these individuals. These people aren't just getting these things off the street. Some of the most people who are the most opposed to racial equality are the people who use the religious institutions as the way of doing that. It's just like burning the cross. Burning the cross is in and of itself supposed to represent the prophet Jesus, and allegedly what happened to him. I mean, so that's really at the basis of what they're utilizing. It happens in our religion, even in Islam. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there was always this joke where it says, y'all black people went from the back of the bus to the back of the camel, because obviously sometimes that is the way that they treat you and they use that as a way of justifying it. And so it's like belief without action, and I think that that's really where we are, unfortunately. How do you get to people who really uses the very thing that should make them, compassionate, how can you do that when that very thing is what is allowing them not to actually show any compassion for people who are being mistreated?
But revolutionaries don't worry about trying to make others feel comfortable. Revolutionaries dance to a tune and have a beat of their own. And this is what we have to understand. People that protest understand that there's going to be a backlash usually, and that backlash is going to hurt in numerous ways. We've got to quit trying to get people to accept a reality of right and establish the systems which create and eradicate the unjust policies, practices, and procedures that go on in a given governmental sphere or a societal sphere. When you're able to meet the needs of the people and do it equitably and do it with the right context, those people would be won over real quickly. On the religious end, you look at every prophet, alayhi salam, every prophet came to deal with the oppression or the suppression or the injustice of what was going on in that society. So each of the prophets came to fight an unjust system that was prevalent at the time. You cannot be of a godly nature and say you are of a godly nature and don't attack injustice, don't attack suppression and oppression. If you do, you're being hypocritical in nature.
I mean, we talked about this last week, that basically you judge the society by its weakest people.
Yes, sir.
I mean, if you go, that's who we really are. I mean, basically we're living, you know, a double life.
Yes, sir.
You know, we're saying we're a certain way and that we're patriotic and all these other things, and then you have individuals that are living in dire poverty. That's right. You know, and then the same way, I mean, that's the same way about the prisons. You know, people don't understand, you know, you'll never make some of these individuals understand, but it's the social ills that causes it. Yes, it's right. It's really just basically there's something more dire in a society where you're just locking people up. I mean, what is causing that? Right. I mean, you know, you got so many things going on in this country, and you're having a system that basically has systematically targeted certain individuals. There's always going to be people say, hey, if you do everything that you're supposed to do and stay out of trouble, you'll never get in trouble. I mean, that's just the way, you know, the way it works. But the reality, that's not reality. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's not, it really doesn't work that way. Yeah. So what do you think about that, Rosa?
Well, I feel like as a Christian myself, I feel like in the Bible it even says in Deuteronomy 15:11, therefore I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy and to the poor in your land. Right. So that in itself, you know, calls us as Christians to look out for our brothers and sisters who are in need. And right now we see that all of those individuals, African Americans being unjustly shot by police officers, are those in need. Mm-hmm. So we need to reach out and stand up.
Right.
The 10 Commandments weren't 10 suggestions, were they?
Yeah, they were commandments. Right.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's something else. I mean, you know, like I said, I mean, you can't, and I agree with you. I mean, you look and you're hoping that there will become a time in society where people will understand what's going on and that people will actually, you know, realize what they're doing. And I'm hopeful, you know, that day will come. But until we get there, I think that we need to begin to start. I mean, I'm not going to apologize for anything that we're doing. I don't think that we need to try to convince people that Colin Kaepernick is not doing something that's wrong. You know what I mean? Because, I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, we clearly, Colin Kaepernick is doing exactly what needs to be done in this society. And I'm the last person to actually ask the question as to try to justify what he's doing. He's doing what he's supposed to do. And my hat's off to him. And as to what he's doing. And we need more people like Colin Kaepernick. Because if we had more people like Colin Kaepernick, then we could do some things. Right? Man, that went quick. Wow. But at any rate, again, man, I appreciate Gulam, I appreciate you coming in. Garth, I appreciate you coming in. Hopefully you'll be able to come in again and chime in with us and start talking.
Donald Trump, he need to open universities for Midwest or for his people who voted for him, but he hasn't done a single university for them. You know, and if he wants to pull his people out of the poverty.
I got 10 seconds. So anyway, so thank you. So until I know you wanted to get on it, but until next week, I'll see you and stay blessed.